Szanowny Panie Prezydencie, Panie Rektorze, Panie Rektor oraz Pani Dziekan i Szanowni Wykładowcy i oczywiście studenci. Dziękuję serdecznie za Waszą dzisiejszą obecność tutaj i mam zaszczyt prezentować Wam konsula Argentyny, Miguela Cunię, który wygłosi dzisiaj wykład na temat Wysp Malwiny oraz rozwiązaniu sporów międzynarodowych. Przekazuję już jemu słowo i życzę miłego wykładu.
Thank you very much. Before to begin, sorry because this lecture was supposed to take place last week, but I was chore. I think many people. So, I'm sorry. So well, to begin. Do anyone here have any idea about what are the Malvinas or Falkland Islands, or any idea about what we are going to talk about? Yes? Okay, that's a good beginning because not always. So well, we will try to explain the situation of Malvinas Islands from our point of view, from the Argentine point of view, which is not the same as the British, of course, but we will try to see why, which are the reasons of our claims, and try to explain it from a historical perspective, because we think it's the best way to know a little bit about the history of this diplomatic conflict, to make it easier then to understand other implications of this. So, to begin, what is the issue of Malvinas Islands? How do the Argentina understand it? We will say that it's a diplomatic dispute between two countries, which are Argentina and the United Kingdom, over the sovereignty of the Malvinas or Falkland Islands. It's important to take into account that this issue, this controversy, also includes other islands that form part of this archipelago, which are the South Georgias and South Sandwich and South surrounding maritime areas. Then are Shetland and Orcadas Islands. You will see that for sure those names, like Georgia, Sandwich, Shetland, Orcadas, which are not here, you will see the same islands or with the same name in the north of Scotland. So are British names which were given when a few centuries ago after the Scottish islands. So well, where are located? Anyone does have any idea about the location approximately of the Malvinas, Shetland, Georgias, and so on? Approximate idea? Well, we will see the map here, and here we have this part. What we see here is Patagonia, is Argentina. This is Ushuaia, which is the capital of that province here, which is the province of Tierra del Fuego. There we have the Falkland Islands, the Malvinas Islands, South Georgias, South Sandwich. Here is the Argentine Antarctica, Weddell Sea, Drake Passage. And as we can see, all those islands, Malvinas, Georgias, Sandwich, are all surrounding the Argentinian territory, surrounding Patagonia, Ushuaia, Argentine Antarctica, okay? And we will see the distance. Malvinas are 13,000 kilometers away from London, and less than 500 kilometers away from the Argentine mainland, to have an idea about the geographic location of the islands. So, about the discovery of the islands and about the first settlers. The discovery of the islands, here, this is an old map where we can see, well, maybe for you it's a little bit difficult to see it from where you are. The names of the islands and of the territories are in French. Because it was discovered a few centuries ago by European sailors. There are several theories about the discovery of the islands, but the most approximate to historical facts is the theory that says that the islands were discovered in 1520 by a Portuguese sailor who was Esteban Gomez, Portuguese sailor at the service of Spain, of the Spain crown. And which is important is that when those Spanish or Portuguese sailors came to the South Atlantic Ocean, in this particular region, they didn't find indigenous population. Something different from what happened with the whole American continent, where there were indigenous, not from Canada to Argentina. But not in this particular region, maybe due to the climate, which is very, very difficult to live. And what's going to happen after that? Those islands, discovered by a Portuguese sailor at the service of Spain, will be recognized as Spanish by all the European nations, including Great Britain, in different treaties like Utrecht and other treaties of the 17th and 18th centuries. It was a time where there was several wars among European nations, and the coalitions of countries were changing all the time. So today, maybe France, Britain, and Spain were allies in a war, and tomorrow they will be fighting each other. And in those difficult times, in the 18th and 17th centuries, which is finally with the Utrecht Treaty, those islands are finally recognized as Spanish. And in consequence, between 1767 and 1811, we will have 32 consecutive Spanish governors in the islands. Britain will not protest about this. Why those dates are important? Because now we will see, because until now we have only Spaniards in the Malvinas Islands. So when did the Argentine population arrive on the islands? Here we see, this is the Declaration of Independence. We obtained independence from Spain in 1816. And according to international law and international uses, Argentina inherits all the territories that belong to what was at that moment the viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, or River Plate, and among them the Malvinas Islands. 4 years later, 1820, Argentina will formally take possession of the islands, of the Malvinas, South Georgia's South Sandwich. We are talking about 1820. 5 years later, the first country to recognize Argentina as an independent country will be United Kingdom. Both countries had strong economic interests in common. Argentina was at this time will begin and then will gain a more important role as a provider of raw materials for England, as well as Australia and Canada. So United Kingdom will recognize Argentina as a sovereign country and will have no objection about its independence, about the territories inherited from Spain. This man that we are seeing here, he's from Argentina. He will be the first governor of the island. His name is Luis Bernet. And in 1829, he will be appointed by the Buenos Aires government as a political commander of the island. He will have a daughter, which will be called Malvina, after the island's name. When we saw that map 2 slides before, which was written in France. It's important, well, it's maybe anecdotic, but the name Malvina was given by French. It was Malwin, and after that, in Spanish, it became Malvina. So, Luis Bernet will be the first Argentine governor of the islands, appointed by the Buenos Aires government in 1829, and Malvina, his daughter, will be the first person registered as born in the islands. This looks anecdotic, but it's important because we were saying that there were no indigenous population when the first Portuguese, French and Spanish sailors came to the islands. So this man's daughter will be the first person registered as born in that territory, which was empty until that moment. What happened in 1833? After the Napoleonic Wars, Britain will be regarded as the foremost naval power in the world. A few years before the end of the Napoleonic Wars, there were two attempts of conquer Buenos Aires by the English army, 1806 and 1807. British tried to take advantage of the fact that Napoleon had invaded Spain. Spain had no control on their South American colonies, and the port of Buenos Aires was interesting for the British due to reasons of commerce, because Spain had a monopoly with the South American colonies, and for British it was necessary to break with this monopoly. So there were several reasons why they will attempt in two occasions to conquer Buenos Aires with no success. So after that, what we were talking about, the Napoleonic Wars that came to an end in 1815, and the European map changes, and France is not going to be the most powerful country in Europe. This place will be now taken by England after Waterloo and after the defeat of Napoleon. So, strategically, for Britain, the South Atlantic is important. Then we will see a map with the British colonies in the South Hemisphere. We will see the reason. So just 18 years later, at the beginning of 1833, British warships will come to the South Atlantic, will seize the islands. They will expel these Argentine authorities, Mr. Luis Bernet and their officers from the islands, the small military garrison that Argentina had there, and their return will be forbidden. What is more important even is that from this moment, from 1833, since British came to the Malvinas Islands, they will start a process of settling British families, mostly from Scotland, from Ireland, from Wales. They will come to the islands. Again, the islands were empty. The Spanish discovered them. Argentina inherits the islands along with the whole mainland territory after its independence from Spain. Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, appoints a governor, which is Luis Bernet, set a small garrison and some soldiers, which are expelled in 1833 by the British, who will bring their population from Scotland, from Ireland, from Wales to the Malvinas Islands. At that moment, Argentina begins with its protests in different international forums and trying to find a solution with the British, but there was it was pitifully not possible. So finally, United Nations are going to pronounce on this particular in the 60s. In 1960, we will have the resolution 1514, which is a resolution that takes place in the middle of the process of decolonization of Africa. Was the moment when, after the Second World War, we are now in the Cold War, 1960, European countries begins to give their independence to those African colonies. French African colonies, British, German in the case of Cameroon, Portuguese colonies, Spanish colonies, etc. So this resolution passed on 1960 will be the first one in taking into account the principle of self-determination and territorial integrity. This is important because we will see where is based the British claims. This resolution also proclaims the necessity to find a quick solution and to put an end to the colonialism in all its forms, not only the African colonialism, but in all its forms. 5 years later, we will have the first resolution exclusively for the controversy of the Malvinas Islands. It will be in 1965, and this resolution is important because it refers, here United Nations says, well, we have a sovereignty dispute between two parties, and this is very important, two parties, Argentina and United Kingdom, over a territory which is located in the South Atlantic Ocean. And the dispute, according to United Nations, must be addressed promptly through peaceful negotiations, and which is more important is that the objectives, the goals of the United Nations Charter must be taken into account, as well as the interests of the population. Here we have highlighted two words, because we will help us to understand the whole situation of nowadays. We have two parties, according to United Nations, we have two parties, only two parties, and forgive me because I repeat it a lot of times, but we will see later that according to the British, there are not two but three parties, but according to United Nations, we have two parties, and we have to take into account the interests of the population. Then we will see why interest is such an important word in this context. What did happen in 1982? Anyone have any idea? This is closest in the time.
It was a war.
There was a war. Any idea about the war?
Between British and Argentina.
Very well, very well. 4 years later, we knocked them out of the World Cup with those Maradona goals, but that was a different story. That was 1986. But, well, here we will see. This lady, for sure you know her, is Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, very well, who passed away, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And there's that one there, he's the General Leopoldo Galtieri, which was the Argentine president in 1982. So, in April the 2nd of 1982, Argentine army takes over the Malvinas Islands. There was a situation where diplomatic negotiations were taking place, but the two parties couldn't reach an agreement. Despite efforts of United States, President Reagan was trying to make both parts to reach a peaceful solution, but anyway, pitifully, both parts will engage in a war that costed almost 1,000 lives among both sides. The war was not long, it lasted for a few months, but which is important about the war is that according to United Nations, here we have the Argentine surrender June 14, around a little bit more than 2 months after the beginning of the war. The war did not affect the nature of the sovereignty dispute. It means that even when the British won the war, according to the United Nations, the result of the war didn't put an end to the sovereignty dispute. After the war, both countries will, here is Queen Elizabeth II and former President Carlos Menem of Argentina in his visit to London in 1998. Because after the war we will come back to a period of very good relationships among both countries. At the end of the 80s and early 90s, both countries will resume consular and diplomatic relations. They will sign the declarations of Madrid, according to which both countries recognize the existence of a dispute of sovereignty. It was something that United Nations said in 1965's resolution, and which is important about this is that from 1989 and 1990 will be the first time that the United Kingdom also recognizes the existence of this dispute. Pitifully, even when both countries recognize that there is a dispute, even when United Nations recognize that there is a dispute and prompts the countries to find a peaceful solution, to talk about the situation, pitifully from them, and as always, United Kingdom refuses to talk about the situation, about to negotiate the sovereignty on the islands. So this is very important because we are coming closer in the time, and since 2004 we will see in this map here, we can see different British colonies until today, 21st century. Among them are Malvinas Islands, Georgias and Sandwich, Tristan da Cunha, Santa Monica, Ascension in the African coast, some territories around close to Australia, Pitcairn here, the Caribbean, Bermuda close to the United States, Gibraltar here in the south of Spain, and other possessions in the Mediterranean Sea. At the moment of the conquer of Malvinas and Georgias and Sandwich, it was important because for the British it was a whole path to Antarctica. You see, Argentina has a part of Antarctica, claims part of the territory of Antarctica, Great Britain as well. For them it was important to have all this path way to the south, especially in those years of 17th, 18th centuries, when it was important to control or to count on different points to during the different European wars and the wars that take into account the African colonies. To have those strategic points was important. But we are now in the 21st century. I mean, it was 300 or 400 years ago. But still today, Britain has this whole complex of colonies. Despite what United Nations says in its resolution of 1960 to put an end to all forms of colonialism, we see here that even when United Nations more than 50 years ago is claiming to put an end to colonialism, United Kingdom still has all these colonies around the world. And which is more important even is since 2004, United Kingdom will start to give priority to its military bases in Malvinas. To the extent that today they have the largest existing military base south parallel 45. This is important, and now we will see why. They are having among 1,500 and 2,000 soldiers deployed to take care of a civil population of 3,000 people. It's like you have there almost one soldier less than every one people. I mean, the proportion of soldiers among the people is between the 50 and 75%. It's really, really, really high, especially for a place which is far away from everywhere. Britain spends around $200 million. This is European Union and NATO money per year in have soldiers here, when right now the conflicts are here in Ukraine, but they have their soldiers and their money in the South Atlantic. These are some pictures of the kind of weapons and artillery that the British are deploying in the south of Argentina, which besides endanger the area because even for their population it's not, I think it's not very convenient to have this kind of warships, helicopters, submarines around the area. But well, it's deployed since 2004 in the South Atlantic. This also is contradictory to another resolution of the General Assembly, which asks for the parties to refrain to avoid introducing changes in the situation, at least while the dispute, the sovereign dispute, is not a solution. It's still being negotiated. Do anyone here listened about a referendum that took place in Malvinas, Falklands, just less than 2 years ago? Yes? And did you know something about the results of the referendum or the implications of it? Well, thank you. Well, but what do you think about beforehand? If someone asked you about any legal effect of this referendum, what could be? I mean, they were voting about their self-determination. 99.9% of the people there voted that they wanted to be British, not Argentine. So the question here is, which are the legal effects of this referendum? Here's one of the voters. And the legal effects, from our point of view, are no. And we will see why. The British were voting in 2013, they were deciding, that population in Malvinas were deciding if they wanted, they were asked if they wanted to be British or Argentinians. Mr. Cameron, after the referendum, said, look, 99.9% of the population there in the Falklands, they said they want to be British. But the point is here, you are asking to British what they want to be. This referendum, which is illegal from our point of view, was carried on the basis of the self-determination principle, which we were talking that United Nations proclaimed in the 1960s. But the thing is, to ask about self-determination is necessary that the one who's been asked is not the same who asked. Because here the thing is, the point is, we had these islands empty, discovered by the Spanish, by the French, and with no population. Then Argentina inherits it from the Spanish, brings population there, set a governor, a garrison, bring population. That population is expelled by the British. The British bring their population from Scotland, from Ireland, from Wales, from different parts of the United Kingdom. To put it some way, it's like today, let's suppose, that in Crimea, Mr. Putin decided to expel the Ukrainian population, to bring Russians, and after that, he will ask to those Russians, what are you going to be? What do you want to be, Russian or Ukrainians? It's a similar situation, hypothetical if it happened in Crimea. Why, according to United Nations, this principle of self-determination doesn't apply to this case? Because what we were talking about, here we have a population which was transplanted from United Kingdom. We take Scottish, Welsh, Irish, we take them from the British Islands and we send them to Argentina, to the Malvinas Islands, and we settle them there. So, this population is same as the metropolis population. I mean, the one who is asking, Mr. Cameron or the British government, is asking to British, what do they want to be? So there's no sense, the principle was applicable to the African colonies, for example, where you had African people, native people, then European conquerors, and then United Nations asked those Africans, well, do you want to remain a French or Spanish or British or Portuguese colony, or do you want independence? There it makes sense. You have two different kind of populations. A metropolis, European in the case of Africa, and African indigenous population. But here you're asking to the same people that was just transplanted to one point of the world to another about self-determination. So, to close the lecture and to open a space for your questions and comments. Toward the future, what our government proposed is that both countries have an opportunity, a chance to set an example for the world, solving by peaceful means this controversy, avoiding to leave this for the future generations. And but the only way to make it possible is to sit on the table to negotiate. It's a long process, it's tough, it's not easy, but according to us, according to Argentina, according to the United Nations, it's the only way to sit, to talk, and to negotiate. Thank you very much.
Przede wszystkim, czy ma ktoś jakieś pytania? Thank you very much for your lecture. Dziękuję Państwu za obecność i zapraszam oczywiście na następne spotkanie z cyklu Sztuka Dyplomacji, które odbędzie się, mam nadzieję, pod koniec kwietnia i zostaniecie też poinformowane i będzie następne spotkanie z którymś z dyplomatów, ale to jeszcze pozostaje niespodzianką. Dziękuję.